This week, I'm going to show you how to use an intervalometer. If you use a Sony camera like the a7 III and you want to shoot time lapses, you'll have to get an intervalometer. For some reason, they don't include an intervalometer built into the camera, which most other brands do. This seems a bit of a pain, especially now with the a7 III, where they've gotten rid of the time-lapse app. Now, the only way to shoot time lapses on a Sony camera is to use an intervalometer. Most intervalometers look the same. You have a little LED display, then you have a series of buttons on the bottom. I'll show you what all of these functions do, what the buttons do, and how you can use it to create time lapses or take long exposure shots. Along the top, you have a tag, and by pressing left or right on the directional pad, you can choose any of the functions: delay, long, interval, N, and audio. These may be different on your intervalometer, or they might be in a different order, but they all pretty much do the same thing. This is the time that you want to delay the start of the time lapse. Maybe you want to get into or out of the shot, or you want to wait some time before the camera starts taking the time lapse. This is where this is useful. This is how long the shutter will be pressed for. If you're doing long exposures in your time lapse, you could use this to hold the shutter open in bulb mode for however long you want, and you would set that here. This is how long the interval is between the shots. This is the one that you will use all the time when shooting time lapses. I set it anywhere between 1 and 30 seconds. If you were doing exposures longer than 30 seconds, this is where long would come in. So you could set this to a minute or however long your exposure is going to be. But normally I set my time lapse interval between 1 and 30 seconds, so I can set the shutter speed on the camera. This is for the number of shots you want. I used to use this function, but there have been a few times where I've shot a time lapse and just coming to the end of the number that I set, something interesting was happening in the shot. There was no way to reset this number and the time lapse just stopped. I could have started it again, but there would have been a jarring point in that time lapse. So now I set it to infinity and stop it when I want. I normally take around about 350 images in a time-lapse sequence, but towards the end, I'll see what's going on in the frame and see if there's anything interesting passing through the frame. If there is, I'll let this happen by carrying on shooting and then stopping it after that point. So if you want to set a time-lapse going when you're sleeping, say with an astrophotography time-lapse sequence, you would set this number to 300 or 350 or however many images you want, and then you'd be able to sleep knowing that the camera is going to stop once it's got to that number. The musical note will turn the beep on or off. If you're doing quite a quick time lapse, say a shot every second, and also if you're doing a time lapse while you're sleeping, it can be really annoying having a beep going off every 30 seconds. So I tend to have this turned off. To change any of these settings, put the tag on the setting you want to change and then press set. That's the center button on the directional pad. It will start to flash. You have your hours, minutes, and seconds. So use the control pad to select the one that you want, and then use the up and down buttons to change the figure. Once you have the number that you want, press set again to keep it where it is. The light and lock button is a double function button. Press it for a short duration and the light will come on. Press it for a long period and it will lock all of the buttons. This lock button is actually really good. I've had the intervalometer buried somewhere in my bag. I had the audio beep on and it was beeping away because I'd inadvertently pressed the start-stop button. I could hear this beeping in the hotel room and I didn't know where it was coming from. And it took me ages to find out where. So if you hit the lock button, this will stop this from happening. The button on the right is the start-stop button. This button will basically start or stop your time lapse. The bottom button is the manual shutter release button, which has a hold function built into it. So it actually doubles up as a long exposure shutter release as well as a time lapse intervalometer. Also, when using this hold function on the shutter release button, it will start a timer when you click it up to the hold position, so you know how long the shutter has been open for. This is great as you don't need a stopwatch. Just put your camera into the bulb function, press and push this up to the hold function, and then it'll count the seconds for you. They normally take 2 AAA batteries. I tend to put a strip of Velcro on the leg of the tripod and then one on the back of the intervalometer, so it's not blowing around in the wind. To shoot a time lapse, set your camera to single shot, plug the intervalometer into your camera, set a delay at the start of the time lapse if you want it, set the interval time to where you want it, make sure the intervalometer isn't dangling in the wind. This could inadvertently bang on the tripod and cause a bit of shake while the camera is taking the photos. Press the start button. All you need to do then is calculate the time you need to wait for the camera to get the amount of shots that you want for the time lapse. Once you're done, hit the stop button. And that's about it. If you're interested in shooting time lapses, click on the eye in the corner. This will take you to the video showing you how to do it step by step. An intervalometer is a vital bit of kit if you want to shoot time lapses, especially if you're shooting with a Sony camera. And nowadays you can get some relatively cheap ones from Amazon. The branded ones are really expensive, so stick to the Chinese copies. As always, if you like what you see, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't, give me a thumbs down. And for weekly tutorials, hints and tips in photography and videography, subscribe and turn on notifications. I'll see you in the next one.